My name is Carolyn Morrison Jensen. My friends call me Lynn. My World War I ancestor is George Gale Brooke Jr. He was my mother's brother, my mother's stepbrother. He was in the infantry. He was very young. He joined at 17, I think. He was first sent to Mexico, and then when World War I broke out, they called all of the Philadelphia troops that he was with and sent them to France. Photographs were sent when he first joined. They had pictures taken of the new recruits, and of course they were full of all kinds of enthusiasm. Apparently when he first went to Mexico, it was a lot of spiders and I don't know, things that they might not have, and hot summers and so forth. Spent very little time there, and not that as much training as they would do today, I don't think. Whatever I haven't been able to find out directly, I've done by research. For instance, he died on October 3rd, 1918, and of course Armistice Day was November 11th, just about 5 weeks later. And so I researched the date of his death. As it turns out, was just the last day of the first offensive, which was October 4th. And so then you can sort of narrow it down and study that particular battle, which I've done, and then you sort of get a better idea of what the story is behind it all. Both my grandmother and grandfather were totally devastated. My grandfather died 10 years after that. He was older than she was, having had the first family. And it just broke his heart. He never... When Congress moved for the Gold Star Mothers Act, they provided for the Gold Star mothers who chose to go to France. Actually, it was after the war, and the choice was that you could have your son brought home, or you could go over there and visit, and they had established the National Cemetery there. He was in the largest cemetery in Europe, the Meuse-Argonne Cemetery. And she was the beneficiary of his service. And so she received a lot of mail and had a lot of back and forth with the government for several years to settle that. And it was the amount of $10,000 over a period of 20 years. And that was what she lived on, really. They didn't have Social Security in those days. I was 8 years old when she died. And so I don't know directly, but I've done a lot of research on Gold Star Mothers. I did a program for an organization in May, and I just have studied, and very clear in the Gold Star Mothers book, they have an enormous coffee table book that is fascinating for the history of Gold Star Mothers. And so I learned what they were to bring and how they were chosen by lottery, how they were chosen by state, because the idea was that they would support each other in having shared the same experience. My mother didn't talk much about having lost her brother, except that it was such a sad thing because he was so young and they loved him so. But she said he was a brave soldier, and we had many in the family. And I've traced my family history back to the militia in 1630 in Plymouth and Roxbury, Mass. And the ancestors who came over to Pennsylvania were Quaker. And they came over in 1699 and had certain experiences. One of them was Captain Benjamin Brooke. He was originally from Limerick, and then he moved to the Gulf Mills here. And he was a captain and spent 3.5 years serving in the Revolution. He started out as a lieutenant and became a captain. And I have other ancestors also who served in the American Revolution and the War of 1812. Private Nathan Brooke, another Brooke. My late husband Mike and I shared a great deal of interest in history, and especially military history. So we had taken a World War II tour in Europe, and we were driving along the Autobahn, and our guide said, "This is the Meuse-Argonne forest." And I said, "Well, my Uncle Gale was killed in the Meuse-Argonne forest, and he's buried over here. My grandmother came over to visit him when she was a Gold Star mother." And she said, "Well, we won't be able to stop now, but we can. I can find out exactly where he is." And that's wonderful. They have an arrangement placed before the cross, and they put the gold lettering that comes from the sand of Normandy Beach, and they wet the sand and put it in the engraved part of the cross, and then clean it off, and it looks like gold lettering. And then, of course, when the rain comes, it goes away. Once you have a direct interest, you just tend to want to research it. And I share it a lot with my family, and I've shared it a lot with people I'm a member of several lineage societies, and I hope that they experience a similar thing, where you really bring the service and the patriotism to their heart.